So we're just gonna a minute. All right, so we're at about 5 past. I want to be respectful of everyone's time. Thank you all for being here. Just as a reminder, we are recording this session, so if you missed anything, don't worry, it'll be available after the meeting for us to review. But Alan, if you're comfortable, I think we'll get started.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone, and yeah, please start.
Okay. Well, welcome everyone. It's nice to see you all again. It's been a while since this group has met as a whole. I think the last time was November, and it's been a long time since I've seen you all. I am back from maternity leave and ready to jump back in this. So I'm excited to be with you all today. All right, so we're going to get started. So here we go. We sent around an agenda earlier in the week, last week, and just as a reminder, we're going to cover a couple of things today, but if there are some kind of outstanding questions or comments that you folks have, feel free to jump in at any point. A couple of things we're going to cover, the project schedule update, the actual LWRP draft document we're going to give a little update on, a very exciting proposed projects update, and then a quick intro to local consistency review law. I promise it won't be too boring. And then a public engagement update. So plenty of updates happening at today's meeting. So if we could really quick, just because it's been a little while since we've all been here, just quickly go around the Zoom room just to let folks know who are here. Hi, Nora Culhane-Friedel from MJ Engineering, and I'm a planner working with you folks on this LWRP. How about we hop over to Alan?
Yeah, hi, my name's Alan Duckworth. I work for the town of Brookhaven, environmental analyst, and I'm the town's project manager for the LWRP.
Thanks, Alan. And then I'll toss it over to my colleague, Jackie Hakes.
Hi, everybody. Jackie Hakes, project manager on the consultant side for this effort, assisting you. And it's good to see your faces. We were just talking with Alan. It's been a little bit, so good to see everybody.
Yeah. And then let's see, how about we'll shoot up to Lori?
Hello, I'm Lori Devlin. I'm the village clerk in the village of Patchogue, representing the mayor.
Thank you, Lori. And I see we have Charles with us. Charles, I'm gonna give you the unmute prompt. There you go.
I'm Charlie Flagg. I'm a research professor at Stony Brook, interested in the Great South Bay.
Thanks so much. Susie?
I am Susie Goldhirsch, president of the Far Island Association.
Thanks, Susie. I see we have Abigail.
Hi, yes, Abigail Long, part of the consultant team with Andrew Pogon Associates.
Thanks, Abigail. And I'll go right through there to Darren.
Yep. Good afternoon, Darren Damone with Andrew Pogon Associates. We are the landscape architects on the consultant team.
And it looks like we also have Todd.
Hi, everybody. I'm Todd Montgomery, also with Andrew Pogon.
Thank you all for being here. Sticking with the consultant vein, Andrew?
Hi, Andrew Thabert, Bay Environmental Consulting, primarily providing environmental expertise related to the inventory and also the project profiles.
Thanks so much, Andrew. Looks like we have Jeremy with us.
Hi, Jeremy Campbell, New York State Department of State, and I manage the South Shore Estuary Reserve Office for Department of State.
Thank you for being here. Allison?
Hi, everybody. Allison Branco from the Nature Conservancy.
Thanks, Allison. Jessica?
Hi, everyone. I'm Jessica Zanka-Worth with Suffolk County Economic Development and Planning.
Great. And it looks like we have Alex Romero. Hi, good to see you.
Good to see you too. Alexia Romero, Alex Romero, Superintendent, Far Island National Seashore.
And finally, Barbara. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, Barbara Kendall on the Department of State Local Waterfront Revitalization Program. We provided the grant to fund portion of this LWRP.
Thanks, Barbara. And I would be remiss not to just offer our gratitude to the Public Information Office, the town of Brookhaven. Ed's here helping us out with the tech. So thank you so much, Ed. We really appreciate that. All right, so thank you for all of those introductions. It's good to see everybody again. Hopping right into it. This is just a little check-in for everybody to kind of see where we are along in the process. Our project schedule and scope, you can see, I don't know about down on Long Island, but where I am right now, it's definitely thawing out, feeling like spring finally. So we're looking right here at this kind of blue circle. The draft LWRP document is in process, as we call it. We are working through this document and doing a lot of writing and gathering information. We're also hoping to share that information with the public. We had those two, identical public information sessions. What was it now? Spring 2022, excuse me, 2022. So we're looking forward to sharing kind of what's new, what's happening, give the public another update in this, next few weeks coming up. And we'll share a little bit more about that. But also just, a quick look ahead. We're going to keep on working through that actual draft document. Hoping to do a update with the town board, another public meeting, and then wrapping this up. We're nearing the end here, hoping to wrap this up by fall 2023. So very exciting. Jumping into the draft LWRP document update. This is just a general snapshot for folks. We are looking at, kind of a complete list of all the sections. Like I said, this presentation will be available for folks after the meeting. So you'll be able to, I included a link here down at the bottom that provides a little bit more detail and guidance on each section if you're interested in taking a peek at that. But so far, we're making really great progress working through these. We have sections 2 and sections 3 that are being reviewed by New York State Department of State, Barbara Kendall, and then also by Alan with the town. So these are on track, and we are working through currently, and something that we'll be sharing with you folks today, section 4, proposed land and water uses and proposed projects, which is, I think, the most exciting part of this process. So with that, I think I'm going to toss it over to Jackie.
Thank you, Nora.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so as Nora said, it has been a little bit since we have seen you all, and the last time we did talk with everybody. We shared some preliminary ideas about proposed projects and land and water projects, got some feedback from all of you. We also, in November, several team members were able to be on site and have a meeting with Alan and several elected officials, as well as other town staff members, to kind of brainstorm even further some of these proposed projects. And that was a really wonderful meeting. We've taken all of that we have learned, as well as what we've learned from the public through all the public engagement to date, taken what we have learned through the existing conditions evaluation, which is still a work in progress, but that was that section 2 that Nora had identified in the LWRP. And then really utilized our team's expertise and knowledge to help refine those proposed projects, add to those proposed projects. So what we'd like to be able to do today is to share with you an updated list of proposed projects. We're going to kind of just walk through that list. We do have our team members here to be able to help answer any questions. We wanted to get any initial feedback from you about these proposed projects. And then ultimately, we will, at the end of this week, be sharing that section 4 of the LWRP with you that has expanded information, more detailed information about each of those proposed projects. And we would be asking you for your input and to share your ideas on that section 4 and on those proposed projects. Ultimately, what we're hoping to do is to get those to a level where this group feels they can be presented to the public at the April meeting. Just in terms of, hey, these are the types of projects that this committee and the LWRP can include, having a check-in with the public to say, are you okay with these? What do you think? What else needs to be considered? And if you'll recall, we have identified collectively essentially 5 categories of projects. There is a water quality category, what we're calling a living resources category, a resilience category, a public access for the waterfront category, and then educational and institutional partnership. Nora, if you can move forward, please. All right, so we're going to start with the proposed water quality projects. And I'm going to ask if my fellow team members, Andrew and Darren, if at any point you want to, add anything to this, feel free. This certainly is kind of an open discussion here. So there are a number of proposed projects within the water quality category. One thing that we have heard from the beginning of this process, not only from the town, but the community, is that the water quality is critical and it is important, along the South Shore. So these are the listing of proposed projects. So a water quality monitoring program, a living wetland, ponds, and waterways inventory and restoration program. So understand what is existing, what areas might need to be restored to be able to continue functioning in the way that they should be naturally. Stormwater inputs to the coastal environment program. This is something that can build on existing programs and existing inventories that others have started within the area. Increase the adoption of innovative and alternative on-site wastewater treatment systems. This again is something that we've heard quite a bit of, and I do know some of you on this call are actively engaged in your neighborhoods and communities and trying to understand what alternative systems might be available. Town-owned comfort stations and restroom upgrades. So this is really helping to not only increase the usability and an experience of folks within the waterfront, but it also does serve an important function from a water quality perspective. Voter education and outreach program, reviewing the existing aquaculture program and conducting a feasibility study to expand that program. Ultimately, from what we understand, there has been some work done in understanding what might be able to be expanded from that, and expand the Bay Constable program. All right, so that is a very quick listing of the proposed water quality projects. And the idea is that collectively, all of these would be able to help have a positive impact on the water quality over the long term within the South Shore. Andrew, I'm going to ask if you had anything you wanted to add with regard to this grouping of projects related to water quality before we ask for any input, an initial reaction from the committee.
Yeah, I'd say we probably don't have too much time to go through. I'd love to go through all of them, but we obviously don't have that kind of time. So I'd really just point out that within all the projects that we're going to discuss today, there's overlap. So there might be something that's missing. Maybe it'll be touched upon somewhere else, and we just decided it fit in a better category. But obviously, if there's anything that comes up that is not mentioned, definitely bring it to our attention, because these are things we'd like to know. So I think just that everything's kind of interconnected. So we're just looking at ways to improve groundwater, but really like surface water quality is obviously one of the biggest concerns for the public, because it touches upon everything in the LWRP, such as recreation and access and the environment. So if there's obviously any specific questions, we'd be happy to go into deeper.
Thanks, Andrew. So initial reactions from the committee in terms of this list related to water quality proposed projects.
I've got a question. There are a couple of, in addition to the alternative on-site wastewater systems, there are a couple of sewering projects sort of like in various stages of planning and discussion. It seems like they should be on this list too.
Yeah, we did kind of, that was like on our short list. The town itself, the county is really managing a lot of that. So we weren't sure how the town's specific involvement on those projects would be captured. But we can, talk to Alan and see if there's, it could be more of, supporting those types of projects. But yeah, we can look into that.
So, Allison, to your point, and this might be a question for Barbara, with regard to that, because yeah, to Andrew's point, it's that might not be something that the town has a direct, operational or responsibility for. But Barbara, is that something that perhaps we can talk about in another section of the LWRP in terms of the town supporting those initiatives to the extent that they are able to? Would that be appropriate? If it's not a specific action of the town, how do we identify if the town feels that they want to have it included?
All right, there we go. So it could be discussed in section 2, the need, needs and opportunities, the need for some of those upgrades that you're mentioning, Allison, but then also, especially in section 5, which is implementation of the LWRP. And in there, you can talk about the partnerships with other agencies like the county and DEC, for something like that might not be a direct action of the town.
Okay, excellent. Thank you, Barbara. Okay.
I have a question regarding the water quality monitoring program. You may have mentioned this. Are you monitoring for salinity infiltration? Are you monitoring E. coli? What is it that would be part of this monitoring? Is it more of a public health?
So
monitoring?
I can kind of take that. So there's a ton of different water quality that's being collected and recorded already. So this program was looked at kind of identifying what exists and organizing that, and then also identifying gaps. So it would kind of cover, it could cover kind of, it's like a high level, so there's already, they obviously do a lot of beach E. coli testing, and then there are USGS water quality stations and Suffolk County. There's multiple agencies. So some of this, I guess, should also be captured probably in the section 5. But one of the key parts of that too is new projects that we decide to implement to improve water quality. We want to make sure we have baseline data and post implementation data, because a lot of the stuff with water quality, you don't know how effective it's going to be, and we can use that data for assessing that in future projects. So it's a very broad water quality project.
I just want to build on that. Just something that the National Park Service was looking into, partnering with USGS, I believe it was USGS, and looking at pooling of water after storms to determine potential contamination, because we had some initial tests that did test positive for E. coli, and it wasn't certain or clear whether it was fecal matter from animals or from human waste as a result of the wastewater systems that we have out there.
So this was pooling, like rainwater, or you think it was flood water, or?
It could be a combination of both.
Okay.
It just wasn't clear. So it was something that we were looking into exploring within the federal tracts, and also within public lands that were perhaps within the towns. But it's something that we kind of red flagged as a potential public health hazard, particularly after a rainstorm, and people and children puddling and going through puddles. And so I was just curious to know if that's something that you would look into as more of a public health issue, and just alerting and advising accordingly. But it's something that's been kind of higher on our priority list to kind of explore.
Yeah, that's good information. We'll definitely capture it within the LWRP. So thank you.
Absolutely.
Susie, I see you have your hand up.
Yes, I just wanted to follow up along the lines of Barbara's comment about partnering and agencies in multiple jurisdictions on the adoption of IA systems. We've been doing a lot of work, study, reporting, surveying on Fire Island for IA systems, and probably the biggest barrier to adoption that we've discovered is the lack of alignment with building codes, health department codes, state DEC codes, county health department codes, and the need for variances that would allow small plots on Fire Island to install systems appropriately. Right now, the leaching system, the leaching requirements are too great for the small lots on Fire Island, but we understand that some of the systems can be modified to work with smaller leaching fields. So, I mean, I think just making sure that all the agencies, jurisdictions are working together will really advance adoption of IA systems on Fire Island.
Great, thank
Yeah,
you.
I think that might be useful, kind of with Allison's comment on the sewer treatment plants, maybe in that section 5 about partnerships and implementation.
Right. Okay.
Just one other thought that, sometimes there's a fine line between, or a gray line between a project and what's going to happen in implementation. If it was something like the town wanted to take on a coordinated planning process to do a study of how the town would work with the communities on Fire Island and, you know, like an intermunicipal agreement, or I'm just throwing that out there, but just different way, a feasibility project or planning project to look at how best to do that, to manage septic systems and wastewater for those small lots. That could be a project if you wanted to put dollars on it, you know, and a timeline. So, you know, I guess it's up to you whether you want to elevate it to something that's a project or just have it be a partnership in Section 5. So that's up to you, but just wanted to throw that out there.
Thank you, Barbara. And I think part of that might be what the need is, right? And if there is a need to really map out more clearly kind of what the best way to do that is, right? And to your point, Barbara. So, okay, good. Other thoughts with regard to this, you know, refined list of water quality projects or other ideas that that are coming to mind? And I do want to point out, I did mention, so when we do send the, I'm going to call it a work in progress for Section 4, the end of this week, it is very much a draft, but it does have more detailed information, and that might spur other ideas and other comments and thoughts for as you're going through that, and we certainly welcome those.
Just one other thought, and it's just because we are going through this kind of discussion right now with salinity infiltration at the sunken forest and killing off our very, you know, precious sunken forest area. I'm just wondering, as water starts filtering through the aquifers and maybe impacting some of the communities, I just can't help but think of ornamental plantings that could be in keeping to that landscape, and making that part of the educational outreach. And I don't know if that's a consideration, but as you know, instead of the bamboo that's being put up and other things, I'm just wondering if there's other plantings that we could make as part of that outreach to be more indigenous to the area and to local homeowners. So just a thought. And
So,
with all that, you know, climate and
yeah.
temperature and everything else.
Alexi, if we were jumping into the living resources category next, that would have been a great segue.
Okay.
That's one of those like overlap proposed projects that Andrew had mentioned. So we do have a proposed project listed within kind of that living resources. So that is covered, but we you know, we'll certainly talk through that. But yeah, that's great. Awesome. Okay. So if you're okay, everybody, let's move on to the next category, which is not as robust. So this is the educational and institutional partnerships, and I don't mean to laugh it off, but we do. This is where we might need more of your help, right? To understand if there are more, I'm going to say, kind of action items that might that the town might be able to undertake in terms of coordinating and partnering with other you know, institutions within the you know, within the study area. So a couple of ideas, you know, we've already talked about, even under the water quality, some of that coordination, right? So it was kind of hard to, do we put some of those here under the partnerships, or do we have them under the more specific kind of direct categories? Here we just have the marine debris program, you know, recognizing who's joining us today, perhaps Stony Brook. You know, we wanted to brainstorm a little bit more with all of you in terms of what might be a proposed project or a proposed program that the town can be assisting on through this. Any initial ideas coming to mind?
I think Cornell Cooperative Extension would be a good partner, you know, for aquaculture. It's something that we're looking into working with them on at the Violet Cove site.
Excellent. Okay.
Some of the past projects the town's been involved with is Cornell with the seagrass. On the North Shore, we have a project with Stony Brook doing an oyster water quality project. We could do something similar. I personally, I'd love for the town to somehow work closer with academia in the universities and the colleges, particularly in promoting students to be involved. For the next generation of scientists to come through, if the town could benefit from their passion and at the same time provide money to support their careers, it'd be fantastic.
So Alan, to that point, maybe a proposed project could be to identify programs to promote student engagement and student involvement in water quality, living resources, etc.
Yeah, it's a win-win. I mean, the town benefits because the students that are coming through are passionate. They want to succeed. They want to explore. They want to finish their degree in a timely fashion. So they're very keen to work. The university and the colleges benefit because we can provide resources that maybe the town, that the university doesn't have, such as a shellfish facility. And the town obviously benefits because we get information that we wouldn't been able to get otherwise.
Thank you. Other thoughts?
This could be a very naive question. I'm sorry, Susie, go ahead. I got to learn to use that feature.
All right. Alex, did you have a question or?
Yes, the naive question was, what about the local schools and working with making it part of the curriculum? And how is that built into the local curriculum at the schools, particularly those that are, close to the Great South Bay? And there's examples of that throughout the country.
Yeah, actually, that's a great point. We actually have a day in the life, which is managed through the Brookhaven National Laboratory, but that encourages students to work with specialists like town employees, so in the Forge River or the Carmens River or down on the South Shore. So students from a high school level or elementary level get a better understanding of what it is like to be a scientist. And the town thoroughly enjoys and supports that project.
Great. Okay. Susie, did I see your hand raised? Did you have another thought as well?
Yes, I'm not sure if Brookhaven Town does this already. But if they don't, or if they want to expand it, an educational sort of academia partnership around contaminants for groundwater and the bay, some kind of public information that's kind of catchy and interesting about what you should be using and not using in your home and in your yard. Because I think a lot of people would like to make a difference. I'm not quite sure they have a focus for how to do that in terms of water quality.
Okay.
We're looking at a project on Fire Island to do it because, as you know, or as you may not know, there's a lot of outdoor showering in Fire Island where the water goes right back into the ground system without any treatment. So we're looking at this summer about educating folks on those, what are they called, contaminants of emerging concern that they could be avoiding.
So Susie, it strikes me that perhaps this educational program could be a task that these students, partners,
yeah,
can tackle.
I was just thinking about the synergy there because kids are so enthusiastic about telling their parents what to do and what not to do. Send them home with flyers.
Okay. I think that we can very creatively kind of, fold that and create that, turn that into a proposed project that kind of fits within the LWRP.
Just to throw another log on the fire before we move on from this, I would say another, as you're reviewing the documents we sent at the end of the week to related to this particular list of projects or project is beyond academic institutions. I wonder if there are sort of nonprofit partners within the community, particularly surrounding environmental education, that in some cases might be pre-filtering sort of the children who have that sort of inclination towards environmental stewardship, that you could build relationships with and use those nonprofits as resources as well for volunteer opportunities, research opportunities, things of that nature. So some more food for thought.
Great. Thanks, Darren. Okay.
At Stony Brook, there's a master's in marine conservation program, the MCP program. And Ellen Pickich is the person to contact to see if you can make a contact, make some sort of a coordination with them.
Charles, would you be able to share that contact information with our team?
Yep, I can give you her email address, and the MCP program is listed on the School of Marine and Atmospheric Sciences webpage.
I'm actually a proud graduate for that program, so I can help too.
So you know it well, Andrew.
I guess so.
Excellent.
Ellen, do you guys ever hire interns? It seems like this would be the right place to propose creating like a more formal internship program. Your planning department, your environmental department, your marine department.
Yes, we do hire interns, particularly in the shellfish facility and at the nature center up on the North Shore. On the South Shore, we've hired interns for the pike and plover work, but it is certainly something that we could expand, and it's a great idea.
Excellent. All right. Well, thanks everybody. We needed a little more inspiration for this this category, so I think that we've gotten some direction on that. So we'll add to that. Nora, if we could move on to the next category of resilience. So while this might seem like a short list, I think this is one of those challenges where we were trying to figure out which bucket some of these projects really should fall within. But this is looking at, so we talked about the water quality, but as we all know, that's also built into sustainability and resilience. But here for these resilience projects, we've identified the enhancement and creation of natural features for flood and storm protection and creating a program for that. So these are, the natural resilience approach versus a hardening approach to resilience. And then a dredging program as appropriate in key locations. And again, from a resiliency perspective, not only of shoreline protection, but of habitat protection and habitat maintenance, I guess, as well. So these are the, two of the proposed projects from a resilience perspective. And we just wanted to get your initial thoughts on this. And I will say the next two categories, the living resources and the public water access, are much more robust in terms of proposed projects as well. But Allison, I see you've got your hand raised, so you can start us off, please.
Everybody knows this is my favorite topic. I would suggest that before you say we need a bunch of enhancement and creation of natural features for storm protection, the town could really use a bit of climate adaptation planning to understand where those things are appropriate and where they're not appropriate, and to evaluate all of the other options that are out there for managing to adapt to climate change besides those things, which would include even hard structures, but also things like protecting the shoreline that's still natural to keep it that way, helping people back up away from the shoreline whose houses are in danger from erosion and flooding. All those things kind of need to be evaluated. So before jumping right into these like nature-y hard solutions, I would say a little more of a adaptation plan for the town. at least in addition to these things you're listing here.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Other thoughts, comments, ideas, or from our team members? Any other additional thoughts? Okay. Well, let's move. Thank you, Allison. Appreciate that. So what we can do is we can work to kind of shape maybe a broader climate adaptation planning initiative through this.
Yeah, I would just say to Allison's comment that it's a good comment, and we definitely will add that. But that the enhancement and creation of natural features like program does kind of check more than one box. And one of the things that we'll do is suggesting having the town have a better inventory and just understanding of existing natural features, so that they could be monitored and, you know, assessed and see trends. And for instance, you know, looking at their ocean beaches, obviously the Army Corps is ultimately responsible for most of that renourishment, but having, you know, basic data for that can help them support, like requesting for kind of if they're having emergency issues or something like that, and they have this data available, they can it'll support their, you know, requests kind of. So it's, you know, they're very high level kind of program, but it does make sense to have a separate program that kind of would evaluate everything on a wider lens, and then within this program, we wouldn't necessarily go out and just start building new natural features without having assessed comprehensively. So just to clarify.
Thank you. Alexi, you have the hand.
Yes. Just along the dredging program, because we have internal conversations about this, is also what to do with the spoils and understanding where they go. Because I wonder if there is a way to take an island-wide inventory of really areas that may need it or not, or, you know, again, just systematically think about where to put the spoils.
Yeah, it's a good idea. I think the way we envisioned this program was more of a support role for the most part, because the town doesn't generally do a lot of dredging themselves. It's done at the county or at the federal level a lot of times, or sometimes the state level. But knowing that it's kind of been a neglected area for a long time now, and so this program would be more about supporting, doing the inventory within the town's limits of areas that need it, maybe doing some of the preliminary steps such as permit acquisitions and testing, so that we could kind of wrap these up in a bow and have them more likely to be actually you know, executed by maybe someone else. But we're also including the possibility that maybe the town would have to do it themselves. But I think you bring up a really good point, is this dredging is kind of needed all over Long Island. And I was involved in I think it was a regional planning council kind of subcommittee where it's an issue everywhere, and disposing of this material or stockpiling it is a big issue. So I think maybe within the implementation 5, we might want to discuss having a more broader spatial context and interagency kind of coordination for managing this, what's becoming kind of a problem in some areas.
Thanks, Andrew. Okay, if everybody's okay, we can move on to the living resources. So there's several items here. I'm going to just kind of run through these and then ask our team if they want to add anything more to it. But first up, the Marine Ecological Survey and Shellfish and Seagrass Restoration Program. Next is the Living Wetland Ponds and Waterways Inventory and Restoration Program. So I think maybe to build on what Andrew had mentioned for some of the previous projects is that, yes, it's a program, but also inventorying as part of this proposed project to know what and where needs to occur. We have identified here an upland habitat preservation and restoration program, a rare, threatened, or endangered shorebird monitoring program, a living shorelines program. Again, that might be, connected very closely to some of the resiliency items we've just discussed. An invasive species management plan. And I'm going to mention that ties, Alexi, into your comment about more natural landscaping, but there's also, the concept of from a functional standpoint as well as an aesthetic standpoint, right? So how do you manage that? And then what else can you do in place of those invasive species in some instances? Finfish habitat improvements and former duck farm mitigation. Again, as you can see, some of these could very easily have fallen under the water quality piece, but we've put them, under the living resources. Andrew, I didn't know if you had anything that you wanted to add to any of these and call out specifically for any of these before we hear from the rest of the group.
Yeah, I think again, I think we might want to give it off to the committee to see if they have any specific questions. I would just caveat that some of these programs, like former duck farm mitigation, is a little more specific. Some of these are more, they're rather broad, like the living wetland pond waterway inventory restoring. Like that's a very high level program that would have, potentially lots of projects within it. And with regards to like restoration projects, just in my experience, they can be very difficult in being successful. So when we say we're doing this, it's also like a high level, making sure that we're first doing inventories and making sure we're actually making the right decisions, and we're not just doing something to do something. We want it to be very successful and cost effective and, most beneficial. But I think I'd pass it off to the committee, see if they have any comments, questions, or additional things to add.
I have one for all the ones where you have like an inventory and one of these more high level programs. And when we see the description, it probably is already in there, but I would say like inventorying and then prioritizing where restoration should take place should be an important component.
Yeah. Yep. So we're for the wetland waterway ones, it is high level, but from the public outreach, we did receive a lot of like specific projects. So we're like capturing them, and we've supplemented that, but they're more just potential projects where, like you said, we want to prioritize things because there's a million reasons to do this, not just one. So we want to make sure that it's multi-criteria decisions are, implemented.
Other thoughts and ideas?
I had a thought. This is Barbara. Going back to this programs you were just discussing, it's helpful for us if you had said within them there may be several projects within them, so it's helpful for us to have you describe what the projects are, because down the line, or even today with LWRPs that are already approved, we often go through LWRPs. When we hear of, say, federal funding for something, we'll be asked, oh, look at all the LWRPs on Long Island and see which ones have projects related to this, to recommend for things. So to have them be more specific is helpful, even though I understand, that some of this inventory prioritization might need to be done first, but perhaps that could be phase one, then phase two would be X, So if there's a way to do that, that is very helpful to have in the LWRP.
Yeah, I think we have like a high level description of what the issues are. I don't know if we included it in the project plans. I think we just listed the sites, but we can revise that to include, some of it was invasive species, some of it was water quality or stuff. So I'll go back through and make sure that we describe it as much as we can.
Great. Okay, great.
Okay, great. Thanks, Barbara. Okay. Other thought? Oh, Alexi, is your hand?
Yeah.
Go ahead, please.
This is a more of a selfish plug. So we are in the process of well, let me back up. Allison knows about this. We are a recipient of Inflation Reduction Act funding. And so as one of our project proposals, we are submitting for a position, environmental protection specialist position, that could help with some of these projects at the GS-12 level. So hopefully when we receive the funding in hopefully the end of the summer, we'll begin the recruitment to begin looking at what does our shorelines look like on the base side, and what could be remediation or coastal interventions that we can work with, the communities and the towns and the county with moving forward. So we have one huge compliance document, hopefully agreement over the 4-year period. So hopefully we'll recruit the position at the beginning of October to work with the multiple jurisdictions to develop what could be a shoreline project or the start of an environmental compliance process that can identify what coastal interventions could look like in the future.
Yeah, that's great. We do know that we do highlight the base side of Fire Island as being a very vulnerable area that's in need of something. So that's good.
So one thing I wanted to bring up, and Alan, I hope I'm not going to put you on the spot here, but I know that internally we've had some conversations about, the possibility or the feasibility of a shellfish facility on the South Shore. And I wanted to ask you, is that something that needs to be elevated as part of a more formalized conversation as part of the LWRP process? What is the town's thoughts with regard to that?
The town supervisor is very keen to get a shellfish facility on the South Shore. There has been some land, I don't think it's town owned, but some land that's been identified that could be a suitable site. But with any facility, particularly if you're growing shellfish and holding them year round, it's going to have to be well staffed. And that could be, so one, you need the money for the construction, but also you need money to man it year round. So it'd be an expensive enterprise if the town went down that path. But certainly from the town board, they are keen to get a shellfish facility on the South Shore.
So that might be if it's something that the town and the group would like to have identified as a proposed project. Barbara, to your point, that might be one of those projects that has multiple phases, built into it, to help, like a feasibility of, where it makes the most sense, even if there are some preliminary ideas for that, then, ultimately, possible design and construction of the facility, et cetera.
There's already a shellfish operation in Islip, which has been going on for decades, as well as a bunch of smaller operations in Carmen's River and various other places. So it's not clear that you need a completely new facility just because it's in Brookhaven and not in Islip.
I think part of it was to create some redundancy in case the isolate broodstock didn't produce as much clam or oyster larvae as the rest of the Long Island needs. But also they were thinking of growing scallops as well, so branching out away from just clams and oysters into other species.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, all these projects, there's different timelines for different projects. So, we have some LWRPs that have projects that, been on the books for a while and haven't started yet or on the back burner. So there's no harm in putting it in as a phased project, just as if it's supported by the community, of course.
Okay. Yeah, I think to build just a thought that came to mind is that, the level of complexity in the variation of complexity of some of the proposed projects that we've talked through. It is kind of all over the board, right, in terms of what we're talking about. So that makes sense, Barbara, from a timeline perspective. Those that are more complex may likely be more costly and might just take more time. Okay. Other thoughts on the living resources proposed projects? Okay. All right, let's move on to the public waterfront access. So I'm going to set this up, and then Darren, I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit if you want to expand on this. So I must admit this one, and on one hand felt like, oh, this will be, we can very quickly understand what's going on here. And then we realized it's a little more complicated in terms of identifying appropriate locations for improved waterfront access or new waterfront access. And I think I'm going to speak for myself and maybe for other members of our team. I think it really started to take shape when we had that work session with Alan and his colleagues at the town and some of the council members from the various wards that make up our study area in the South Shore, and it really started to make a little more sense, at least for me from that standpoint. So what we've identified in terms of the public waterfront access are, there's the primary access, then we have what we're calling secondary access, and then tertiary access. So it really seemed to make the most sense to really kind of focus the access under these kind of three subcategories, if you will, because it is such a large geographic area and there's such a range of community types and access types. This just seemed to make the most sense. And, I have to say, when Darren and his team kind of proposed this, it just started to fall into place for us internally. So we hope it does for you as well. So the primary access are really direct improvements of expansion to the waterfront. And we have identified specific locations for that primary access, including Blue Point Dock, Shorefront Park, Shirley Beach Manor St. George, Shirley Marina Park, Webby's Beach, and Havens Point. The secondary access are the more inland areas that you can access via bicycle or other non-motorized craft. And so we've got the Montauk Highway as an east-west bike corridor, improved bike lanes to the waterfront. Bike lanes to the waterfront. Sorry about that. Roadway improvements at the waterfront, non-motorized craft launches inland, so kayaks, etc. At Carmen's River, consider a blue way. So access, you think of a greenway trail, a blue way trail. And then the tertiary access is how do you find it and how do you navigate, right? So that's really about the signage and the wayfinding component, which, while it might seem not as critical, is important to how people are utilizing the waterfront and accessing the waterfront. So this is what we have proposed in terms of proposed projects related to the public waterfront access. And so, Darren, I didn't know if you wanted to expand on this a little bit more, but the intent here is to identify the feasibility of these improvements and these access points as the quote kind of proposed projects associated with this.
Yeah, and one point I do want to make, and I think all this will make a little bit more sense maybe once you get the packet of information we're going to send later on this week that sort of starts to visually represent what some of these, particularly the primary access projects, are. And to Jackie's point, what we're really looking from you all is to sort of proof of concept. So take a look at them and let us know what is realistic or not realistic about some of these proposals, particularly because most, if not all of them, rely on some level of interagency coordination, whether that's through easements and access or something like that. And what we've done is you'll see sort of how we broke it out within the documents that we'll send. We've established, different ownerships that may be in play with any one of these projects. And I think if you could take a look at those and say, well, that relationship doesn't exist, or it can't, you know, for whatever reason isn't feasible to sort of, you know, build this particular project because of X, Y, and Z. I think that's the level of direction we're looking to get out of these, so we can either cross off or build additional projects into here, because there may be some that we're not thinking about. That is a, you know, an opportunity we just missed, and you can say, you know, add this particular project to the list. I will say too, one of the things that we're still doing a little bit more research on is down in terms of the secondary access list of projects. We are looking for more opportunities for the non-motorized craft launch areas inland in these particular inlets. We've listed a couple as examples within the list that we'll send to you. But we are actively looking for other opportunities, you know, small plots of land that the town owns that can be used for, again, a small kayak launch or canoe launch or something like that. I think the biggest challenge with those is parking. So making sure the lot is big enough to at least accommodate a couple, you know, parking spots so somebody could sort of take their kayak off their roof rack and drop it in. So, but I think that's about it for this.
Thanks, Darren. Appreciate that. Yes, Allison.
Two things. The first one, I'm just going to channel our Mastic Beach friends because none of them are here. They would want to tell you about their blue-green trail they're trying to create in Mastic Beach. So it would be great to, like, they've done a lot of planning already. It would be great to specifically name it in your secondary access list. And then the other thing that really strikes me is all these primary access sites that are listed here. I think if my mental map is working right, they're all like on the main body of the bay. I think it's good that you're talking about non-motorized launches inland, but what about like focusing on a couple of primary access sites in the rivers or the creeks also? Because I think they're some of the best parts of the Great South Bay ecosystem, and you wouldn't want to leave them out entirely.
Totally agree. And I think that's something we're going to, I don't want to say stumble upon, but as we identify pieces of property that are viable for something, I think we'll need to figure out from a sizing perspective whether they're suitable for just a launch or maybe potentially a slightly larger community park or something like that. So I think that's a great point.
And I think that points to the part of what we tried to do is a couple of cases like Manor of St. George. You obviously have this large property that's sort of become available. It's connected to Wertheim, which makes it a huge property potential. But then more often there are these little clusters, which are all kind of within walking distance from one another. And those can kind of conglomerate and become something that's a little bit more substantial. So I think that those were the ones we got really excited with, is when we can kind of track these little bouncing smaller properties upstream and find ways of, you know, again, through that maybe tertiary access of just kind of making them feel like one place. All of a sudden they become one park rather than just kind of a scattering of isolated places.
Can I ask a follow-up question about that particular thought, in that one of the biggest challenges with, I think, most of these is parking. So are there, and the sensitivity around parking within a residential community potentially. And I think that particular issue becomes amplified when you get up into these sort of inlets where it's more heavily residential. Are there any thoughts from the group in terms of strategies that we can take? One of them that we're taking with a couple of the primaries is that trying to leverage other community properties like libraries or things like that to sort of find a dual use for their parking lot, whether it's underutilized or finding alternate hours to use it. That's one thought, is finding those sort of co-relationships within those particular areas. Are there any other things that we're not thinking about in terms of solving that issue of parking, and parking that doesn't impact the residents within those particular smaller sort of residential communities?
At the county, at the Violet Cove site, we are looking to have a kayak launch at that site. And to Allison's point, Suffolk County has a Blue Way trail plan. I don't know that you folks have seen it. If you haven't, I could send that along to you.
Yep, we do have that. Yep.
Okay. So what we were talking about is possibly having maybe shuttles or some bike shares so that folks could park, you know, for Mastic Beach, at least in the downtown, and then take a bike, or if we have some sort of shuttle or some sort of, you know, group transportation to address the parking issues, because that's one of the major issues to the
Okay.
waterfront access.
Another thing in terms of like stringing those properties together that's probably worth noting in this report, over time, Brookhaven has already purchased and taken donations of tons of flood-prone property that people don't want to live in anymore or develop anymore. And that's only going to increase over time. So those are the kind of places that you can use for access and, you know, to, if you need a stopping point between two existing parks or whatever. So it'd be worth maybe evaluating the availability of those kind of parcels. And I think it's also worth just writing in your report, like parcels that were purchased through federal buyout programs, often you can't build paved parking on them. So that's very limiting. So it's worth just writing that in your report, because that helps give everybody ammunition to get more flexibility from those federal programs. But also, you know, properties that the town has acquired through some other mode do have more flexibility to put like a parking space or two or whatever other kind, you know, bike rack, whatever things are needed. So looking at like what different types of properties have different restrictions on them. So that's maybe worth considering.
Yeah, I know the town did mention that. I think a lot of the funding sources for their preservation, those buyout programs, they actually can't do anything on them, and that's been an issue. So we do have embedded in one of these programs, I can't think of projects, we do have a sub project to identify funding for buyouts that are related to preservation, but we could potentially use them for parking or for stormwater, you know, bioswales and stuff like that. So, but we can kind of, you know, marry these projects together a little more, maybe.
Mhm.
Also, in terms of parking, residents are always going to complain when you put parking near their houses. So I think it's worth pointing in this report, explaining that to make it viable in a residential neighborhood, you have to have good law enforcement in the area to prevent it from becoming an attractive nuisance. That's really the only solution to that problem.
I would just like to add to what Allison just said, law enforcement and also some kind of sanitation or garbage maintenance, because there's a remarkable amount of trash that ends up in these public access points.
Yeah, we had, for a project not in this area, we actually had cameras installed because they redeveloped a dilapidated marina somewhere, and the neighbors were not happy turning it into a park, which seems counterintuitive, but we put up cameras that are monitored, I think, by public safety in town of Oyster Bay. So there's a few options.
Oh, Alexi, is your hand raised? Sorry about that. I didn't have you showing up on my screen here.
It has been, but it's okay, because I think this is all connected to the conversation, the dialogue. So we manage, as you probably already know, the William Floyd Estate in Mastic. And we've been working with, I want to say it's the Mastic Conservancy in establishing water access there. So you could put that as kind of like an asterisk kind of to look into, but it could be a stop or a launching location for if it's a water trail, connecting that as a resource to come visit.
Thank you. Other initial thoughts, and you know, as Darren indicated, what's coming your way later this week provides much more information. So kind of each of these kind of bullet points is its own proposed project, but all underneath, providing the primary access or secondary access. So hopefully it'll make a little more sense once you do have more detail. Okay. Any other thoughts or comments about this listing of proposed projects? So I want to thank you all. This has been, a really great discussion, really great conversation. I think that we've gotten some more direction, which is what we were hoping for today. As I mentioned, you will be getting, I'm going to say, a work in progress of section 4. It will be draft form. There will be some, some gaps, but we wanted to get it out to you at least so that you could take a look at what's called the project profiles. So there's, more detailed information about each of the proposed projects that we talked about today. Keep in mind what's coming your way this week will not have those additional projects that we talked about today. So we'll be working to fold those in. I just don't know that we'll have enough time over the next couple of days to make that happen, but we want to get you the bulk of what's already been prepared and is in the works. And we're going to ask for you to take a couple of weeks and get some comments back to us so that we can share and prepare to share this with the public at the April public meeting. So with that, if everybody's okay, we can shift into the next agenda item that we have. And this is really just an introduction. We wanted to make sure everybody was aware of another key element and key component of the LWRP so that you kind of understood what was happening. Ultimately, you will be seeing the full LWRP document as well as the appendices, and we want you to be aware that this is going to be a part of it. And that's the local consistency review law. So each community that does have an approved LWRP must have a waterfront consistency review law and a waterfront consistency review form that is included. And so you will as well. And this is part of what will be a local law that the town adopts as part of this process. And so this ultimately is a way for the town to evaluate actions within the South Shore waterfront revitalization area. So we've talked about the study area before, that are taken or funded or approved by the community, and making sure that they are consistent with what you have identified in the LWRP, in particular the policies of your LWRP. Okay, and so if you can move to the next slide, please, Nora, that'd be great. So it does identify actions that are subject to the review, and it does identify a particular committee or official or individual to be responsible for the consistency. So an administrator, to make sure that that consistency review is occurring and it's occurring in accordance with your local consistency law. And so those procedures are something that your town can identify to best fit what their needs are. So in some communities, the planning board, for example, may function in that role. In some communities, somebody like Alan might function in that role. And so it's a decision by the town and by the town board in terms of who will be responsible for that. And then the local consistency law is shaped to fit what best fits the town's needs for that implementation. So for some of you who might be familiar with SEEKR, the State Environmental Quality Review Act, there's a form that you fill out, and the town, the planning board, for example, would work through that to see if there are potential impacts or not, and work through that. And that is part of a typical review process by the planning board. The local consistency law would work similarly for local actions. For example, there would be a checklist of whether or not the action is consistent with each of the policies of the LWRP. So the reason I raised this, and that we wanted to just introduce you to the fact that this exists, and this will be a requirement of your LWRP, is that the town, Alan is currently working with his fellow colleagues at the town, including the legal department at the town, to determine what is the most appropriate approach to managing and implementing this local law. So this is something that is happening and is ongoing as we're working through this overall process. Barbara, that was a very high overview, and if anyone's interested, I can pull up the local consistency law template that the Department of State provides. But Barbara, is there anything you wanted to add to that?
No, I think you gave a good summary, Jackie. I think that was good.
Thanks, Barbara.
Well, actually, I guess I will say one thing, that the local consistency law, the next step after the draft is all together is we conduct a 60-day review process. So the proposed local consistency law and the LWRP, and if you have any additional harbor management law or a revision to your existing harbor management law, those things will be draft, go to 60-day review, but then ultimately they need to be adopted before the LWRP is approved by the Secretary of State. So it would be a decision-making process at the local level for adopting that local consistency law and the LWRP.
Thanks,
Yeah,
Barbara.
just to give an update, so I sent, just for the Waterfront Advisory Committee, about a month or so ago, I sent the draft consistency review law to the Planning Department, the Planning Commissioner, the Planning Director, these Board of Zoning Appeals, the Planning Board, various other people, including the Law Department, to get their input into it. I contacted the Law Department 2 days ago just to ask for an update. They still haven't had time to work on it. They unfortunately just snowed under with other things, but it is on their to-do list, and they do understand that it is important that it gets done soonish.
Thanks, Alan, for that update. Yeah. All right. Any questions from the committee members? We just wanted to make you aware of what this was, why it's included, so that when you see it, you can understand why. Okay. So then let's shift into the public engagement update, and Nora's going to pick it up from here and walk us through what we are anticipating for our next public engagement.
Thanks, Jackie. So folks, like Jackie just mentioned, we're looking to our next public workshop. This will be the second one that we'll host for this process. Our target date is April 19th, and this is, we're gonna try the virtual option this time. We did an in-person for the first session or sessions, the identical sessions that we hosted. And we've had a lot of success, with the virtual option. We keep it really interactive to hopefully hang on to folks' attention. The goal is to present these proposed projects that we've talked through with you today, and just get input from the community, give them an opportunity to provide feedback during the meeting. And then also following the meeting, we will launch an online projects questionnaire. And so this questionnaire is pretty straightforward, just giving folks, again, another opportunity to react to the projects using, an online survey tool, hopefully just making sure we can capture as many opinions and as much input as possible from the public. This is a huge study area, as we've talked about many times, so we want to make sure that we're reaching as many folks as possible. So with, keeping that in mind, actually, I'll stop there. Does anybody have any questions about the next public engagement? We will be providing, I'll say this too, we will be providing plenty of publicity materials, and we, for the town, but also to this committee. And we would hope that with all of your networks, you could share this and help spread the word. Those will be made available to you next week. That way we can get the word out sooner rather than later. Allison, I see you have your hand raised.
All right, if you said this and I missed it, what time of day is it going to be?
So we're still nailing that down. Any kind of, suggestions from this group would be helpful, but we're thinking probably more towards the evening, as that usually makes the most sense. Jackie, I don't know if you want to.
I think we were thinking maybe a 5 o'clock start, so to catch people to jump right on before they get busy with other activities.
Right.
Alan, we'll need to confirm that with you and the IT folks as well. One of the benefits, one of the other benefits about the virtual option is that we can record it and post that recording to the project web page, so that folks can go back if they aren't able to join. And I'm sorry, I think I spoke over somebody and I'm not sure who.
That's okay, it was me, and I was going to say the same thing.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, the first public engagement last year, I think we maybe had 30 odd people turn up in person. So, and that was partly the lack of people turning up was partly due to my fault in not engaging the council districts enough. So I'm going to really push the council districts to get their constituents to be involved in this project. But equally, we all need to get the word out. The strength of the LWRP is only going to be as good as the public involvement. So if we can all just mention this public workshop to people you work with or within your communities, groups or whatever, it's just to raise awareness. It will certainly benefit this project.
Thank you, Alan. Yes.
Yeah. Could I have an idea?
Sure.
Yeah, here in Patchogue, we have a committee called Protecting the Environment in Patchogue, the PEP committee. And on April 23rd, they're doing a full day eco fair for which they were awarded a grant in the lobby of the Patchogue Theater with all kinds of vendors and ecological information. I wonder if you might want to have a table there, and I'm thinking you could hand out materials to people and maybe point them to the recording that you make on April 19th. You might be able to get some more engagement through that. I could check with the committee and see if they still have, tables available.
Lori, that's a great idea. One of the things that we can do, because we will be launching that online questionnaire that Nora mentioned on the 19th, we could promote that.
Okay, that would be great. I'm going to talk to Caitlin Jackson. She's the chair, and I'll put you guys together. I'll see what she says. I'm pretty sure they still have room. I'll be there that day with my my tree committee. Village of Patchogue just got named Tree City USA. Woohoo!
Congratulations.
So anyway, I'll put you in touch with her.
Okay.
That'll be great. Thank you, Lori.
You're welcome.
Yeah, we can see what we can do for that. Okay.
All right. And so with that, we're going to move into kind of, the last little portion of this meeting is next steps, just kind of a recap here. Our team internally with all of our consultant team are going to continue to prepare the draft LWRP document, all of those sections that we mentioned earlier. We're going to continue to work through that as a team. Thank you again so much for all of your really thoughtful contributions today to help us refine those proposed projects. We're going to take all of that in with us as we move forward. Like Jackie mentioned, the kind of packet of information you'll get in the section 4 at the end of the week might not totally encompass everything we talked about today, just because it'll take us a little bit of time to weave that in. So don't be totally shocked if you don't see it in there, but we are making note of it, and we will make sure to include everything that we can going forward. So with those, that packet that you'll receive, I'll put all of this in the email. But we're hoping to get your feedback by the 12th of April. That would be giving us enough lead time to make any adjustments that might be needed before we bring these projects to the public engagement session virtually on the 19th. So giving you, a couple weeks to kind of go through that. It will be a lot of information, but we're hoping that, this little teaser kind of sets you up nicely to look forward through those projects. We wanted to just mention, we are planning on having another WAC meeting, not planning on having such a large gap in between meetings like we did last time. We don't have a date set yet, but we were thinking we would send out kind of a couple of dates and see where things fall. I know this one kind of, we stuck with one because we really wanted to make sure that we got folks' opinion before moving forward to the next step. But we'll send out a few dates in the coming weeks to make sure that we can get as many of you folks online as possible, because I think we work really well as a group together, and really appreciate, again, all of the contributions today. It was great.
Yeah.
Jackie, I don't know if you have any kind of final thoughts.
No, thanks, Nora. I think you covered it. I would just say, are there any other comments or questions that folks have before we sign off for this meeting? Okay. Well, I think this was a very helpful meeting for us. So thank you all. It's good to see everybody. We had a great turnout today, and keep an eye out for some of that information that Nora said is coming your way.
All right, everybody. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right, thank you all.
Bye.